In late January 2026, a new tranche of documents linked to the late financier Jeffrey Epstein was released following U.S. court orders tied to long-running civil litigation, reigniting global scrutiny of Epstein's network and his relationships with powerful figures. The documents, often referred to as the Epstein files, include photographs, emails, travel references, and contact records that had previously remained sealed or heavily redacted. Among the most widely reported elements were images and communications connected to Andrew Mountbatten Windsor, formerly known as Prince Andrew. International media outlets emphasize that the files do not represent new criminal charges, but are part of a transparency process aimed at disclosing materials gathered during investigations and lawsuits. The release immediately drew attention because it followed years of public controversy surrounding Epstein's associations and the question of who maintained contact with him after his 2008 conviction for soliciting a minor. The documents were reviewed by journalists across the United States and Europe, with major outlets stressing the importance of context, verification, and caution in interpretation. According to reporting, many items in the files lack timestamps, full explanations, or corroborating detail, making definitive conclusions difficult. Nonetheless, the presence of recognizable names ensured intense public interest. The files include emails suggesting ongoing communication between Epstein and several individuals during the late 2000s and early 2010s, as well as photographs whose circumstances remain unclear. News organizations repeatedly noted that the release does not itself establish criminal behavior by those named. Instead, it provides additional material for public examination of Epstein's social and professional connections. Legal experts cited in international articles explained that such disclosures are common in civil proceedings, even when materials are embarrassing or damaging but not illegal. The focus quickly shifted toward political and institutional responses, particularly in the United Kingdom, where questions were raised about accountability, transparency, and the reputational impact on public institutions. The renewed attention also highlighted how Epstein's case continues to reverberate years after his death, affecting governments, courts, and individuals worldwide. For many observers, the files underscored unresolved questions about influence, access, and the limits of legal disclosure in cases involving elite networks. The document's release marked another significant chapter in an ongoing international reckoning with the Epstein scandal. A central focus of international coverage was a set of photographs included in the newly released Epstein files that appear to depict Andrew Mountbatten Windsor in close proximity to a woman whose identity is redacted. According to multiple news organizations, the images show him crouched or positioned low to the ground near the woman, who is fully clothed, with her face obscured in the documents. The photographs are undated, and the files provide no explanation of where or when they were taken or who captured them. Journalists emphasize that the images appear without narrative context, leaving their circumstances unclear. Media outlets uniformly cautioned readers that the presence of photographs in legal files does not imply criminal conduct. Editors stressed that the woman's identity, age, and relationship to those present are not publicly known based on the released materials. Some reports describe the images as unusual or awkward, while avoiding conclusions about intent or behavior. The lack of metadata or accompanying testimony has made verification impossible using the files alone. Legal analysts quoted in international reporting noted that courts often release exhibits as they exist in records, even when they are incomplete or ambiguous. The photos were widely circulated in news coverage, but most outlets blurred or cropped them to maintain privacy and comply with editorial standards. The reporting also highlighted that similar images involving other public figures appear throughout Epstein-related files, reinforcing that the release is broad rather than targeted. Importantly, no law enforcement agency has cited the images as evidence of a crime. The images instead contributed to renewed public debate about judgment, associations, and optics, particularly involving public figures who maintain ties to Epstein after his conviction. News organizations took care to separate what is visible in the photographs from what cannot be determined. The emphasis remained on describing the material accurately rather than interpreting it. For audiences, the images served as a reminder of how fragmentary evidence can still shape public perception. In the absence of explanation, the photographs became symbols of unresolved questions surrounding Epstein's relationships. International coverage consistently framed them as part of a larger documentary release rather than standalone proof of wrongdoing. beyond photographs. International reporting focused heavily on emails included in the Epstein files that suggest continued contact between Jeffrey Epstein and Andrew Mountbatten Windsor after Epstein's 2008 conviction. According to published excerpts, some correspondence involved social invitations and references to meetings in London and other locations. In one reported exchange, Epstein appears to propose a dinner involving a woman described as a friend, with Mountbatten Windsor responding in a manner indicating willingness to meet. Journalists stressed that the emails, like the photographs, lack full context and do not document illegal activity. However, their significance lies in demonstrating ongoing communication during a period when Epstein's criminal history was widely known. Media outlets noted that this contradicted earlier public claims that contact had ceased earlier than some of the emails suggest. The emails were reviewed by legal commentators who explained that maintaining contact with a convicted individual is not itself unlawful, but can carry reputational consequences, particularly for public figures. Reporting also highlighted that the emails form part of a larger data set, including travel discussions, logistical planning, and casual exchanges. None of the published messages describe sexual activity or criminal arrangements. Nonetheless, the tone and timing of the communications fueled renewed scrutiny. Several international articles pointed out that similar correspondence involving Epstein and other prominent figures has appeared in past document releases, reinforcing patterns of social persistence. The reporting avoided speculation about motives, focusing instead on verifiable content. Journalists repeatedly reminded audiences that emails in isolation do not provide a complete picture of relationships. The renewed attention also revived discussion of earlier interviews and public statements made by Mountbatten Windsor, particularly those addressing when and why he ended contact with Epstein. Analysts observed that inconsistencies between statements and documents often drive media interest, even when no legal action follows. The emails underscored the broader challenge of assessing responsibility in cases where relationships are informal and undocumented beyond fragments. For many readers, the correspondence illustrated how Epstein retained access to influential circles despite his conviction. International coverage framed the emails as relevant primarily for transparency and public understanding rather than legal consequence. The release of the Epstein files prompted swift political reaction, particularly in the United Kingdom, where senior officials addressed the implications for public accountability. According to international reporting, Prime Minister Keir Starmer stated that Andrew Mountbatten Windsor should be prepared to cooperate if requested by U.S. authorities, including potential testimony before Congress. The comments were widely interpreted as signaling a shift toward openness rather than institutional protection. Lawmakers from multiple parties echoed calls for transparency, emphasizing that the issue concerns public trust rather than royal status. Media coverage noted that Mountbatten Windsor no longer holds royal duties or titles, reducing constitutional sensitivities. The British government clarified that any cooperation with foreign legal processes would follow established legal frameworks. In the United States, lawmakers involved in oversight efforts reiterated that the document releases aim to clarify how Epstein operated and who enabled his access. Legal experts cited by international outlets explained that congressional testimony, if requested, would focus on knowledge and associations rather than criminal liability. The reactions also extended to advocacy groups representing victims of sexual abuse, who argued that transparency is essential for accountability. At the same time, civil liberties organizations cautioned against treating document releases as proof of guilt. Institutional responses reflected a balance between acknowledging public concern and respecting legal standards. The royal household declined detailed comment, consistent with prior practice, while reiterating that Mountbatten Windsor has denied wrongdoing. Analysts observed that the restrained tone marked a contrast with earlier phases of the scandal, when institutions appeared more defensive. The political response also highlighted how Epstein's case has evolved into a broader examination of elite accountability. International reporting emphasized that the controversy now centers less on criminal proceedings and more on ethical judgment and public confidence. The files release placed pressure on institutions to demonstrate transparency without overstepping legal boundaries. For governments, the challenge lies in responding to public demand for answers while avoiding prejudgment. The political reactions underscored the enduring impact of Epstein's network on democratic institutions and public discourse. International coverage consistently emphasized the legal context surrounding the Epstein files to prevent misunderstanding of their significance. Legal analysts explained that document releases ordered by courts often include materials that were never tested in criminal trials. Such releases are designed to promote transparency, not to establish guilt. In this case, the files stem from civil litigation involving Epstein's associates and victims, meaning evidentiary standards differ from criminal cases. Journalists noted that many documents were collected during discovery, a process that prioritizes disclosure over verification. As a result, materials may be incomplete, ambiguous, or misleading if viewed without context. News organizations stressed that naming individuals in documents does not equate to allegations. This distinction became central to responsible reporting. Public reaction, however, often blurs legal nuance, leading to reputational consequences regardless of legal outcomes. Experts highlighted that this dynamic is not unique to the Epstein case, but is intensified by the scale of his network and the severity of his crimes. The reporting also addressed the ethical role of media in presenting sensitive material. Editors described efforts to balance transparency with caution, particularly when privacy and unverified implications are involved. The Epstein files continue to shape public understanding of how influence and access operate across borders. For many observers, the documents reinforce calls for stronger oversight of powerful individuals and institutions. At the same time, legal scholars warned against using disclosure as a substitute for due process. The case illustrates the tension between public interest and legal fairness. International articles concluded that the latest release adds information, but not closure. Key questions about Epstein's operations and enablers remain unresolved. The files serve as a reminder that legal accountability and public accountability do not always align. As investigations, inquiries, and document releases continue, journalists and audiences alike face the challenge of interpreting partial evidence responsibly. The enduring lesson of the Epstein case lies in the importance of transparency paired with restraint. Without both, the pursuit of truth risks becoming distorted by assumption rather than fact.